A new report suggests that Joe Gibbs Racing has given up on signing Kyle Busch for 2023. We'll be talking about that and much more in this video, but no, I will not be talking about the Tony Stewart NFTs. You know what's cheaper than an NFT though? Subscribing to this YouTube channel. It's free. You just got to go down below, hit the subscribe button. Believe it or not, there's been a lot of drama in racing recently, whether you're talking NASCAR, whether you're talking Formula One, whether you're talking IndyCar. I've tried to stay on top of it. I think you guys are enjoying the content. I certainly am enjoying making it. So if you hit that subscribe button, you tell YouTube you want to see more of it. It helps us both out. So more details have surfaced in that ongoing Kyle Busch drama. And like I said, it seems like Joe Gibbs Racing is now totally out of the picture for 2023. In this video, we will discuss his options and more in this video. And that and more is this interesting debate that surfaced on social media yesterday about the NASCAR Championship prestige versus the IndyCar Championship prestige. Now, full disclosure, this was sparked by a fellow YouTuber and my pal Darian from the Black Flags Matter YouTube channel. This is what Darian had to say on Twitter yesterday. In my opinion, the IndyCar Championship is more valuable than NASCAR's. The top four in IndyCar are currently 33 points apart based off of consistent points. Meanwhile, in NASCAR, 2 of the top 4 is currently in danger of missing the playoffs entirely. Now, it's an interesting thought, but certainly in some ways, it's also beating a dead horse. As we know, the IndyCar Championship is a more legitimate way of deciding a champion. There's no doubt about that. But the question of prestige is one that isn't brought up very often, and I kind of want to explore it in a bit of detail. First, let's take a look at the point standings in each of these two series. Thanks for IndyCar for putting this graphic on social media. It makes it very easy to put things into perspective. So the point standings after Nashville show us this story. Will Power is on top of the points with 450. That's not super important, but it is important to note that you win about 50 points when you win an IndyCar race. There are a couple of different bonus points, so I think you've got a maximum of 53 points you can score in a weekend. Now, the top 10, not necessarily all in championship contention. I would say probably down to around Scotty McLaughlin is about the furthest out you could possibly be to win the championship at this point. Now, mathematically, I'm sure they're all available, but let's be honest, you're probably not going to make up 100 points on Will Power or Scott Dixon. Now, Darian's point about how important the points are in IndyCar and how consistent you have to be and over the course of a championship, I got an interesting tweet yesterday, or at least an interesting reply, that you can make a case for each of, say, the top 6 in the championship, why they could and should be the champion. So let's go down the list. Will Power. At times, he has been absolutely the fastest driver in IndyCar. He can start from any position in the field and win races, or at least finish on the podium. He could literally start last, and he has, and still finish up at the top. So Will Power, maybe the fastest driver. Scott Dixon, who has been sneaky, even though the sneaky Swede is right behind him. Scott Dixon has kind of been the driver that he always is. He wins championships in the stretch run. He usually starts slowly, but by the midpoint in the season and all the way to the end, you start seeing him win races and rack up massive amounts of points. That's exactly what's happening now, and why maybe the argument is that he's one of the greatest of all time. Certainly, taking second on the all-time win list helped that argument. Marcus Ericsson, well, it's pretty obvious. He's the Indy 500 winner, but he's also the most consistent driver. Typically, you rarely see him finish outside of the top 10, and he just seems to have a great head on his shoulders and able to get solid results and solid points. Joseph Newgarden has been fast but fragile. It's feast or famine for him. He's either winning races or he's in the wall. And we saw that perhaps more personified than anything at Iowa Speedway, where he won the first race and crashed in the second race, though no fault of his own. Alex Palou is the reigning champion. And frankly, his championship performance, or at least why he maybe deserves to win a second championship, is the enormous amount of pressure he's put himself under with the signing of a McLaren contract and a Chip Ganassi contract, and now faces a lawsuit from the current team he drives for. The pressure mounting, Alex Palou still performing. And Scotty McLaughlin has just been probably the most improved driver, I would say, from last year to this year. He's got a win, 2 wins actually, and is beginning to look like a really, really strong IndyCar driver. His drive at Nashville was maybe one of the best of the whole season. So you could take 6 drivers right now with 3 races to go in IndyCar and throw a blanket over them. Any one of them would be a deserving champion. Now let's go over to NASCAR. And looking at the point standings as things stand right now, it would be Chase Elliott. He's ranked both first in points and would be first going into the playoffs. Ross Chastain, third on the board in points, second on the board in the playoffs. But the thing that Darian really wanted to point out, and I totally understand what he's saying here, is looking at the drivers who are high in the point standings, but potentially going to be out of the playoffs. Now, with the way the playoffs work, if you win a race, you are automatically guaranteed a berth in the playoffs. Now, I need to put an asterisk next to that because there's almost a situation right now in which there could be more winners, meaning 17 winners in a season, than playoff spots. If that happens, no drivers will point in to the playoffs, and in fact, a driver who won a race would not make it into the playoffs. As things currently stand, Ryan Blaney would point his way in to the playoffs. He would actually be ranked 4th. Martin Truex Jr., who was 4th in the points, would be on the outside looking in. Hard to believe. 14th on points, but without a win, is Eric Jones. He would be ranked 18th in the points. So that's, I think, Darian's point, is that Ryan Blaney, who has been so consistent throughout the year, that storyline of that consistency, which has gotten him to second in the points, means absolutely nothing in the grand scheme of things if he can't win anything. And some people would say that's a good thing. But I would point out, we've got 3 races to go before the playoff cut line. You've got Richmond, Watkins Glen, and Daytona. And I would say those two of those 3 races are absolute wild cards. Watkins Glen and Daytona. I think you could see almost anybody win those races. And when you look at the drivers who don't have a win right now, you look at, obviously, Ryan Blaney. Well, he could win one. Martin Truex Jr., yeah, he could win one. Eric Jones, he could win one. Those are the drivers who are in the top 16 points. But once we go below that, Eric Almirola absolutely could win a race. Bubba Wallace absolutely could win a race. Almost did at Michigan. Austin Dillon absolutely could win a race. Justin Haley, maybe not so much. Chris Buescher, I think, could absolutely win Daytona. Ditto Ricky Stenhouse. Cole Custer, he could surprise. Michael McDowell, obviously, Daytona. Harrison Burton, Daytona. Brad Keselowski, I think, could win. Absolutely. Todd Gilliland, he got 4th in Indy, which was a road course, and so if you look at Watkins Glen, maybe. So all it takes is 2 drivers to win and get into the playoffs for someone to get bumped out with a win, and for Ryan Blaney, the second place driver in points, to not be in the playoffs anymore. So when Darian says that this is not as prestigious, or the prestige level is lower than it is in IndyCar, I see what he means, because you have a potential where the second place driver in the championship will not be able to contend for the championship. That seems like a problem. All right, Kyle Busch. Here's a person who will actually be able to compete for the championship this year, thankfully, unless there's a lot more winners this year, which I don't think that will happen. But will he be in the Cup Series in 2023? And if he is, where will he be? The Door Bumper Clear podcast has been a great source for the rumor mill surrounding Kyle Busch, and they were once again yesterday, when they were the first to really say that Joe Gibbs Racing has essentially stopped talking to Kyle Busch, and that he's talking to a Ford team and a Chevy team. That would also seem to back up that ice-cold video we saw a couple of weeks ago with Joe Gibbs and Kyle Busch seemingly pretty frosty with each other. It also backs up a report from The Athletic that hit this weekend saying Kyle Busch's two options are essentially Stewart-Haas Racing and Kaulig Racing. So there's your Ford team, there's your Chevy team. My impression for a while now has been that Stewart-Haas Racing is the odds-on favorite to get Kyle Busch. They have the cash and they need a star driver. But I think Kaulig is an interesting option. It's certainly a team that can get it done looking at their Xfinity success. And Dale Jr., I have to give a shout out to him. He was the first person to really mention this as a realistic possibility on his podcast. He said it would be a great option. And, I have to say, I think Dale Jr. might be ahead of the curve on this one. I mean, personally, I still think Stewart-Haas would be the option that Kyle Busch would choose. But if you think about it and you look at it, does Kyle want to build a team around him? Could he build a team around him at Kaulig? It's a team that can win cup races. They have with A.J. Allmendinger. And if Kyle got the right people or was able to attract the right people to Kaulig, and if Kaulig could get him the cars that were capable of at least getting top fives, maybe Kyle could get a win out of it. But I still think that he's going to want to jump into something a little more established. And certainly Gene Haas has the money to pay Kyle Busch, if not $14 million, close to what he was making at Joe Gibbs Racing. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. Let me know down in the comments where you think Kyle Busch is going. Is he going to Stewart-Haas or is he going to Kaulig? Let me know. We'll see you in the next